Good day, everyone. I am Sanchia Gabrielle SIODENA, and I will be discussing this current law that I've chosen for this topic. And the law or the current law that I've chose is Republic Act 880 Section 4, or the permit when required and when not required. So a written permit shall be required for any person or persons to organize and hold a public assembly in a public place, and any organization or individual attempting to plan and host an event for the community in a public or must get a signed permit. And meanwhile, if there's no permit is necessary if a public gathering takes place in a freedom park or that has uh, been fully established by law or legislation on privately held or anywhere on that has been uh, the school premises of a learning facility that is controlled and run by the federal government and is in a compliance with the guidelines and regulations of that organization. So this act does not apply to political gatherings or rallies that takes place throughout any legal permitted campaigning time. So I've chose this law or current law in this topic because I think that this law, which is about the public gatherings or specifically rallies, that has been uh, currently uh, currently an issue for many of us here in the Philippines. So next one is, to what extent would you feel justified in breaking these laws, or what would I feel justified in breaking this law? So in my own perspective, in breaking a law is not right and is a sin biblically speaking, and is wrong for the eyes of many people, especially here in the Philippines. By breaking this law, which is doing rallies in a public place, by not having permissions to the personnels of the community, that you will be executing this kind of events. So, personally, if I will be encountering this kind of event in my life and I will be in opposition to the law and breaking the law, I'll face it and I will accept my own mistakes and pay the wrongdoings that I did, if ever that I committed this kind of crime or situation. Next one is, to what extent would you feel prepared, as King was, to pay the penalties demanded of one who breaks the law? So, first of all, I salute Martin Luther King Jr., especially that he is a really, really brave man to accept the wrong accusations to him, that he is that many people's attacking him in the government with his work, but he is just doing his part as a leader of his community, especially, and leading them in the right pathway. So, nevertheless, in my part as a normal person and still unconscious to this kind of event or this crime, for me, I'll be in a mixed emotions because of the wrong accusations towards me. I'll feel sad and mad at the same time. I can't do the things King sacrifices for his community, because we all know that King Martin Luther King Jr. is the only person that can do the things that he thinks will be uh, right for him and for his people. So that's all for my part or for my report about this law that I've chose. So I hope that you have learned from me, from my own answers. Thank you. That's all.
Capital punishment, more commonly known as the death penalty, is defined as a criminal punishment that takes the defendant's life as the punishment for the defendant's crime. This penalty is given majority of the time to those who have proven to have caused the most serious crime, for example, murder. So, as this law is associated with death, we can clearly see, and the majority of people can agree that this is morally and ethically wrong. It violates human rights, specifically one's right to life and the right to live free from torture or cruelty. Personally, I do believe that everyone, including those judged with heinous crime, should not be deprived of life. I do think that there is always hope and everyone has a chance for a positive change. Although this law has been abolished by a lot of countries, there are still a few who continue with the implementation of such punishment. So, since this kind of law has barely any scenarios for me to break the law, um, I'm just going to give a scenario. So, if I were in the shoes of, let's say, the executioner, prepared to kill those in the death row, um, as an act of me breaking the law, I would um, refuse to do so, and I would be glad enough to face the punishments for that kind of decision. As long as there is no other person that would experience this kind of inhumane punishment. So what will happen is I will not choose to kill those people. And when people find out what I have done, um, wherein I chose life over death for those in death penalty, it will be the start of a positive change, and I will be proud to have contributed to the um, future of criminals who can change their lives.
Another law that we find morally wrong is the Philippines Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, officially designated as Republic Act number 11479, which seeks to prevent, combat, and prosecute acts of terrorism within the country. It establishes a committee tasked with identifying and labeling individuals or groups as terrorists and give law enforcement agencies the authority to combat terrorist threats. The law permits the prolonged imprisonment of suspected terrorists without the filing of charges, and it also expands the definition of terrorism. Moral concerns have been raised by this act because of its ambiguous and expansive provisions, which could potentially violate human rights, civil liberties, and freedom of speech. Critics contend that the law's vague phrasing gives authorities a great deal of discretion in determining what qualifies as terrorism, running the risk of unfairly persecuting people or organizations who are critical of the administration. I believe that this law is morally wrong because they have the potential to be misused and abused by those in power. Without sufficient checks or balances to protect against abuse, they have the potential to stifle a legitimate dissent, curtail freedom of speech, and disproportionately target individuals or groups perceived as threats by the authorities. The seriousness of the circumstance determines whether or not breaching such law is justified. A moral argument for civil disobedience could be made in cases when people or groups are unfairly singled out or whether the application of law jeopardizes their basic rights and freedoms. However, any decision to defy the law should be a last resort and rooted in a deeply ethical stance aimed at protecting human rights and liberties. Like Martin Luther King Jr., I would understand that disobeying these regulations could have repercussions. As much as I would like to see the injustice resolved amicably and via constructive discourse, I would also be ready to accept the consequences imposed by the judicial system. Civil disobedience inherently involves a willingness to accept the consequences of one's actions, aiming to highlight the moral imperative for change while respecting the legal process, even it may necessitate personal sacrifice.